Hey guys, what's up? This is Natalie for Eline Media's video game design programs at EdAlliance, and I'm coming at you here at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. Hey Dan, I see you there in the chat. Welcome. I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes at the start just to see who else rolls in. Um, we'll be talking some more game dev stuff today and a little bit of IT stuff as well. So hopefully we're able to get some good stuff done today, keep the projects rolling forward. And I was actually able to access a couple people's projects, so that's certainly exciting. I'll toss those up on the screen in a minute and check them out as well. But let's just hang out here for a couple minutes, see who else rolls in. Dan, as you're modding there and helping me out, it might be productive to hop to the old Twitch channel and just see if you can post in the chat there that we're on this channel now. I wouldn't want anybody to end up over there on my old Twitch channel when, of course, I'm now on the Eline Media official Twitch channel from now on. Welcome if you're joining. Just say hi in the chat. Let me know you're here. Hey guys, welcome as always to Video Game Design Online. Happy to have everybody joining in for some more game development. I'm thinking what I did last time was I think we were using the furnished cabin asset pack to play around with some first person stuff. And I was also showing you guys my custom cat avatar that I've put together in case people want to do a project using a third person cat. So we'll start with those things. And I'm also going to talk a little bit today about setting up a scene with a car in it, and maybe building out a city to do a delivery game inside of in case folks are interested in taking that approach. All three options are there for you guys. Anything you want to do is really, really up to you. It's really a blank creative slate for this game making challenge. So I'll start talking about that at about 5 after the hour. But in the meantime, I'm just going to hang out. Just going to chill here on Twitch, staring into my own face. Oh man, hope you guys have been having a good time living at home. I'm certainly getting a little stir crazy here myself, just looking out the window at the gorgeous spring and feeling sad that I can only go out on solitary walks. It's so weird, you know. But what are you going to do? That's our life now. All right, Dan. Hey, I've added you as a mod, so you should be all good here. Still waiting to see if anybody else rolls in. I hope we're joined by at least a couple of the members of our team as usual. Today, it would be great to see some folks from our EdAlliance studio. If you are joining in from the studio today and you are a game maker, say hi in the chat just so I know you're here. Otherwise, we will go on and record regardless of if you're here or not, because we save these videos on our YouTube channel, which is the Make Room official YouTube channel. So we're using that now. It's linked to on the website for everything having to do with this game making challenge. We shared that last time, but once again, that's makeroom.elinemedia.com/online-learning. And if you're part of this game making studio, you should have that link and be able to go there at any time. So definitely connect up with our videos on YouTube and join us on Twitch every week at Monday, 4 o'clock, and Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So I'm seeing 4:05. Not a lot of action in the chat today, but I'm going to go ahead and just talk you guys through the stuff I had planned for today, which is actually, I wanted to start off by mentioning that there's another game making challenge happening also in April that's similar to the one we're doing. So if you've ever done a game jam before, I wanted to just tip you off to the fact that IndieCade is doing a really cool Climate Jam. So Indiecade it's an independent games festival that I'm a part of, and I recently heard from them on the Indiecade Discord that they're sponsoring this Climate Jam for April 18th through the 22nd. So that's coming up this month. And much like the game making challenge we're doing, this Climate Jam has a theme of games about the environment. And they're asking people here to make games about things such as going zero waste, volunteerism, veganism, transportation choices, all kinds of stuff having to do with the climate and the environment. Um, and much like the game making challenge that we're hosting here at our game making studio, this one you can submit a game and release it through the platform of the jam. So I was really excited to see this is going on. It's not just your Eline Media instructors who are running game making challenges, it's happening all over the world. And if you guys dig this kind of stuff, I would highly recommend that you check out this one, which I can wholeheartedly recommend because Indiecade is a great organization. You know, if you submit a good game, I think there's prizes for this. Grand prize winner and runner-ups will be selected, and you can get some really cool accolades and prizes if you win the game jam for this one. So if you're part of our game making studio, you know that we give out pins and patches and small prizes. But if you submit a game to a real jam, you can actually win some pretty cool stuff. So it's worth checking out. If you click on this sign up link, you'll see here that itch.io has a whole page of climate or of game jams that you can check out. Not just this climate one, but all kinds of different themes, similar again to the theme that we're doing of Alone Together. And so I would totally recommend checking those out. However, stick with the one you're doing with us because we definitely want to work with you guys. I just want to clue you in that there's a whole world out there of potential game jams and game making challenges that you could participate in once you become self-sufficient in working on Unity projects on your own. So I was really excited, and I started immediately thinking about the kind of game that I might make for the Indiecade Climate Jam. I'm not sure yet, but I'd also like to make a game for our own game making challenge, so maybe I should work on that one first. All right, so the next topic of business before we go ahead with some Unity dev here is if you're a member of this game making team, I would love to have a team meeting with you guys. I would love to have a team meeting. So if you're watching this video now on Wednesday or later, please keep in mind Monday next week, which what day would that be? That would be Monday, April 6th. I would like to cast to you on Twitch like I normally do with some A+ game development content, and then follow it up with a private Google Hangouts video chat for any people who are current or past members of our in-person game making team at EdAlliance. So we will be offering that on Monday so that we can work out the kinks, get any IT issues resolved. I know on Monday some people had problems with the process of adding collaborators, which can be finicky. And I thought a private Google Hangouts video chat would be a great way for us to resolve any of those issues and then touch base a little bit more directly about the projects you're working on and hear from you guys about what would be the best things we could teach in the next few weeks as we work on this fantastic project throughout the month of April. So again, that would be Monday, April 6th. We'll shoot for having a team meeting. I'll follow up with this on email, but it'll be a Google Hangouts, which means you'll need a Gmail account to join the meeting. If you have any issues, concerns, always feel free to get in touch with me, but that will be the plan. And now this Monday would be the best time for you to join out of any of these sessions, because it'll be your opportunity to connect with me face to face, and actually for us to talk instead of me talking and you listening, which is of course how Twitch works. Caveat that you can chat to me at any time. So we'll say Monday, April 6th for a team meeting on Google Hangouts. And then, yeah, for now, I'm going to take you guys through some various continuations of where we were at last time. So let's open Unity. I'm going to hop back into my cabin scene here. If you've been following, you probably remember I was just laying out some basics here with getting this furnished cabin up and running. I had put a massive terrain down, and I was using some of the fun terrain painting tools over here to get there to be some kind of leaves and bushes and stuff outside this cabin. Now, I don't recommend using low poly trees with this particular house. It looks a little weird, but you know, any tree that you load in here will kind of auto paint when you use the tree painter and the terrain tool. So you should find one that maybe fits your aesthetic a bit better, and if you like, you can lay it down. So what I wanted to address is maybe a little bit of basic interaction that you could do inside this cabin. Oh, I do see there's one person in the chat there. I think it's David. Hey, welcome. I was just going to take you guys through a continuation of where I was last time. And let's click off the terrain so we don't have this huge circle. I wanted to talk about you know, a basic functionality you could do inside this cabin of enabling yourself to click to pick things up. Now, I wanted to show this because it continues along the lines of the idea that I got from the original reference game that was an inspiration for this first-person version of the challenge. That reference game, of course, was called My Doll's House. And in that one, you could click to pick up furniture. And I wanted to show you guys a very, very basic script you could work up to make it possible to click to pick up objects in this cabin. And I thought that would be a super fun place to start, and not just modifying how this cabin looks, but actually creating some prototyping some interactions you could have within this sort of mostly static space. We do, of course, have what we saw last time, which was click to open drawers and doors, but it's not really interactive. Nothing's really exciting about opening a door, really, unless there's something in there that you can get. So just let me run this just to remind myself of where I was at. We were here. Woof, that's loud footsteps. And then inside this, I had put a cube in. So we've got that cube sitting in there, but obviously can't do anything with the cube. I can open and close the doors, but you know, of course, I'd love to be able to pick that thing up. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. So I am going to hop out of there and find that cube. Now, if you recall from last time, I made that cube a child of this larger object here. Let's grab it. Gosh, it's hidden. I'm going to click here and actually once again deactivate the doors of this pantry so I can see inside. Now here's my cube. And what I'm thinking here is I want to add a script that gives this cube some additional behavior. And that behavior is being able to be picked up by me as the avatar. So I'm going to create some new behavior by going add component over here. I can actually just go to the bottom and click on new script. And from here, this will allow me to name my new script, and this will automatically attach that script to this cube object. So I'm going to name the script pickup and hit enter. Let's give it a minute here. It automatically popped Visual Studio for me, but I want to make sure pickup is actually attached. And then I'm going to go edit script to be sure I've got the right script open here in Visual Studio. So of course, most of you following along are familiar with using Visual Studio to edit basic C# scripts. So I'm not going to really go into detail previewing the interface here because I know you guys essentially know where you're at with this. So just bearing in mind here, I've added this script to the cube, and now I'm going to start coding up the way that cube should behave when I click on it. So I'm thinking about two things here. One thing is when I click on the cube, I want to be able to grab it. And so I know I need to interact with the mouse. I need to interact with a mouse click for any of this to happen correctly. The other thing I need is I need to know where the cube is going when I pick it up. So if I go back to Unity and think about this for a second, I'm looking at it in this scene and I'm seeing it, and I'm imagining when I click on it in the game, I want it to teleport from where it's sitting to some position close to the camera so that it looks like I'm carrying it. So in addition to interacting with the mouse, a script to pick up and carry an object like this would require me to have a location in space that's attached to the player where the picked up object can teleport to at the moment when I click. So before I code up any lines of C#, I'm actually going to add that location in space. And as always, as I'm talking through this, if you guys have questions, don't hesitate to type them in the chat. I'll answer them as they come. If I'm speeding along too quickly, definitely let me know. So to figure out where I should locate this, let's call it a carrying location, right? It's the location where an object I'm carrying sits in front of the camera. I'm going to click on the FPS controller, which is, of course, the player game object here in the hierarchy. This is the thing I am when I play the game. Let's turn on gizmos just so I can see where that thing is. Now I'm seeing a lot of gizmos here, and hopefully I can just ignore these. I'm looking at this capsule, which is, of course, essentially my body in the game. We don't need a human-shaped body because, really what I am when I'm a first-person character controller is I'm just a camera that's moving around. I don't necessarily need to render a human body. But one thing I do know is when I look out of this capsule, I'm looking out along the z-axis. So I'm looking out along the blue axis here, the blue arrow. And that means that I can put this holding location somewhere out in front of the z-axis. So I'm not going to put it over here in front of the x because that would be to my right, I think. Don't quiz me, but rather in front of the z-axis. So I can actually just right-click to create a child object of the FPS controller. And then I'm going to go to create empty. So I'm highlighting on my empty game object now, which is why the gizmos for the player have disappeared. I'm going to name this carrying location. Let's call it that. And then I'm actually just going to drag it out in front here on the z-axis just a bit. So that means it's forward of the player. And then maybe I'll pick it up because I want it to maybe come high enough, right? We can tweak this, but I noticed that original point was kind of in the middle of the player controller, and I think the camera might be a bit higher. I see it over here in the middle. Yeah, let's put it there. We'll have to polish that up and make it look correct in front of the camera later. Looks like I got 2 here because I did this before. Ha ha ha. Let's just leave one of them. You know, props to me for prepping for this class. So we've got our carrying location, and now I'm ready to go with this thing, and I can actually start coding up the script. So I've got this empty game object here, and I'm going to hop back into Visual Studio and start coding up the behavior I need. All right. So the thing I need here is I need to interact with the mouse. That was what I said before. And to do that, we're actually going to use a built-in method called onMouseDown. So onMouseDown is similar to onTriggerEnter in that it's already in there. You know, if you just type in the first few letters, Unity is going to load it for you. And if you mouse over the method name, Visual Studio explains, onMouseDown is called when the user has pressed the mouse button while over the GUI element or collider. So in this case, if my mouse cursor is over the collider of the game object that this script is attached to, this code is going to run. All right. So this is a really nice method because it allows us to just simply detect when the cursor is over stuff in the world and run some logic accordingly. Now, there are some issues with this, right? Like you might want to make sure that you're actually within a certain distance of a game object before you can click on it and stuff like that. But for this, you know, we're starting from scratch. Let's just start with the basics and get us picking up the object. So I'm going to use onMouseDown here. And what I want to do is, again, this script that I'm writing is behavior for the cube. So any logic I write here is something the cube is doing. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to teleport it to the location that I set in front of the player where it looks as if I'm actually holding it. So I'm going to type GameObject.transform.position. And then I'm going to have it equal to, where do I want it to go? I want it to go to the carrying location. So before I continue this line of code, I actually need to reference that carrying location. And I can do that by running public transform carrying location. When I hop back into Unity, I'll be able to pass in a reference to that very location by dragging it into the inspector. We'll do that after I finish the code. But for now, I have the reference I need, and I can type carrying location here. Of course, I need to reference carrying location's position as well, because the type we're dealing with here is a vector3 and not a transform. So that's our first thing. And then the next thing I want to do is actually make the cube's parent be that game object so that when I move, it moves with me. So I'm going to type here GameObject.transform, and then I have a nice method here called setParent, and I'm going to put carrying location inside. So I teleport to that location, and that location becomes my parent, so that if that location's transform changes, my transform also changes. In other words, if that location moves in space, I move in space with it. So a couple of other things I need to do here. First of all, I need to also be able to drop the object. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a corresponding method on mouse up. And in on mouse up, I'm going to undo what I did in on mouse down. I'm going to set the parent of the transform to null so that it is not at all attached to the player when I let go of it. And I think that's actually all I need to do. But we do have one more slight thing to keep in mind. We don't want this thing to be interacting with gravity while we're carrying it. Ordinarily, when we have it out in the world, we would like it to be subject to gravity because it's an object like any kind of box, any kind of thing in the world that you would pick up would be subject to gravity. However, when we're holding it, we don't want it to drop out of the position it's teleported to, which it would do so if it was affected by gravity. So actually, the final thing I need to do here is, while I'm carrying the cube, I need to temporarily disable gravity. Okay, so in order to do that, I actually need to get a reference to the cube's rigid body. This presupposes I have attached a rigid body. If there isn't one attached, I'll attach it. I think I already attached one though. So what I'm going to do here is create a private rigid body, and we'll just call it RB. And then here in start, I'm going to get a reference to my own rigid body by GameObject.getComponent. I type rigid body, 2 of those, and now I can turn its gravity on and off. So here I'm going to go rb.useGravity equals false, and rb.useGravity equals true. So just some gravity on and off here to deal with the fact that once I've clicked on it, I don't want it to just drop to the ground. I want it to stay attached to me, hovering in the air, essentially. Again, which it will do if it's not using gravity. Cool. So let's just see how this works. I hope I can see the cube. I had a little funny business with that carrying location. But happily, this script is already attached to my cube. I've got pickup right here. And you can see that carrying location is empty, and it needs me to pass in a reference of a transform, which would, of course, be this. So I'm going to drag this and drop it in that field. I do already have a rigid body here attached to the cube, which is convenient. And let's see what happens. Cool. So here I am. Here's my cube. Ah, there it is. Very nice. So I can see it here. It's coming along with me and it's not dropping. When I let go of the mouse, it immediately, the gravity turns back on and it falls to the ground. So right away here, I've already got my basic functionality. Gravity comes back and it acts weird. I pick it up and it kind of teleports to where I am. Toss it on the couch. Yeah, it is kind of possible to throw it. Doesn't work perfectly. It's a little bit overly heavy. There we go. So immediately lots of fun stuff for me to do with this. I mean, this is a cube, right? It's not very fun, but I'm thinking of all of the potential meshes I could add here. So great little start with my cube. I wanted to give you guys a couple other additions you could do on this script. So as I was playing with this earlier, I was going like this and and it does have some things wrong with it. So I pick it up. I've got some weird stuff going on with this. And what I just showed you there with the wall is kind of a bad bug. So if I run it into the wall, it really just has a strange reaction. And goodbye. Oh, it's gone forever. Cool. So if you'd like to deal with that, a quick fix involves temporarily turning off the cube's box collider while you're carrying it. That way it doesn't run into the wall and have unauthorized physics interactions. So I can do that really easily. Let's actually say, we don't need to get a reference to it here because we're just going to turn it on and turn it off. So what I would want to do here is when I click on it, I'm going to go GameObject.getComponent, and this time I'm going to get its box collider, and I'm going to go enabled equals false. I can then copy this line, and when I drop it, I can re-enable the box collider. So with that change, got some, it looks a little weird, right? Like maybe we would come up with something that's less of a hack, but also at least I'm not getting it soaring off into space. So maybe this is the more baseline prototype that you're going to use for starting to prototype some interesting gameplay interactions with a pickup like this. All right, so let's put that over there. And one more thing I wanted to show you guys is, well, actually, let's click back in here. So, one thing I find really unsatisfying about this is like I'm carrying it, and then like it just sort of, the way it drops feels frustrating. Like I'm looking here, and then when I drop, it drops right at my feet. I can try to kind of throw it, and sometimes it'll work, but I feel like in most first person situations, you want it to actually go out and away from you a little bit. You want it to go away from you. Like we kind of take things in first person games and we kind of sort of shoot them out. And there's actually a nice way you can prototype that in this very basic script, which is to use the camera's z-axis as a basis for actually kind of, it's like you're like blowing a little puff of wind behind the cube at the moment when you drop it. And I'll show you guys that line of code. It's a little bit involved, but super nice, super works. So I'm going to use, again, the rigid body of the cube, which is the component of the cube that's subject to physics. And I'm going to, when I drop the object, when I drop the cube, I'm going to add force to it. And, if you mouse over add force here, your basic parameter is going to be a vector 3, which are 3 numbers indicating the force in each direction that you're adding to this cube. And what I want to do is actually get what's called the forward of the camera. So in other words, I want to add force to the cube to push it along the direction in which the camera is already pointing. And so I can do that by typing GameObject.find GameObject with tag. And what am I going to look for here? Can you guess? It is the main camera. And then I type transform.forward here. And what that again is going to do is it's going to push the cube when I drop it away in the direction that the camera is facing. And I can give myself a multiplier here. You could set it up to be dynamically taken as an option in the inspector, but let's try, say, 100 just to start. So yeah, I add a little bit of force to the cube when I drop it, and I want to send it away from where I'm standing. That line of code should do it. Let's see what happens. All right. I pick it up. I put it down. And you can see it's not an immense amount, but it is moving out away from me. It's not dropping right at my feet. You can see that there. So the effect I was looking for is definitely going on here. Now, of course, if you want this to be a slightly more pronounced effect, let's just add an order of magnitude. This will be fun. Making sure that it's actually working the way I expected. Woohoo! So there you go. And there it is. Come back to me, cube. Goodbye. So you got your basics there. I think 1,000 is obviously too much because, like, shooting a cube across the house is a little bit strange. But, with something like that, of course, you're going to want to tweak it to work the way you expect. Um, you know, an interesting challenge, if you wanted to work with the basic script I've given you for this today, would be to say, okay, I know how to make it shoot out in front of me. I would like to make it arc up as it shoots out, not just shoot out straight and down. And how would I make it arc up? That would be a really interesting next step in manipulating the physics of this. But, the other thing is to say to yourself, I don't necessarily care exactly how this cube works as long as I can pick it up and put it down. Because what I want to focus on here is creating some interesting objects to pick up and put down. So, thinking about that, let's put this back to 100. And I'm like, if I want to change this cube into something else, I'm thinking, what's another mesh I can put in here? Alternately, if you wanted to create objects from scratch now with this pickup script on them, of course, you're going to drag in a prefab and you're going to attach the script to that prefab to give it that same behavior. With the script written the way it is now, you'll need to drag that carrying location in every time you attach it to a new game object. But that shouldn't be a problem. Let's see if we can do it to the chair. So my script here, pickup. I give it carrying location. We get an error here. There is no rigid body attached to the dining chair. Let's add one of those. And we try again. Okay, so not going to be as easy as I thought here. We've got an issue with the type of collider attached to this chair. So in order to do this, we might have to switch this up. Of course, I was interacting with a box collider, so, you might have to attach a more basic collider to something like this if you wanted to actually function as a pickupable object. But still, let's see if we can get this to work. All right, it's sort of around the chair. Third time's the charm. Still not working. Come on, chair, I want to pick you up. Oh, man. All right, well, I have no idea why that one didn't work that time, honestly, but you guys get the idea, right? Like, create an object, attach the script. Eventually, you'll be able to figure out what's wrong. If it's not, I would hope. Let's look in the console and see if we got any errors. No errors, huh? Strange. Anyway, I don't know why that one was off. If you guys have ideas, obviously throw them in the chat there. In any case, we've got this little pickup script here, and the idea I generally had for what I wanted you to do was, maybe playing with something fun like clicking to open and then, we find things, right? And then you could include some additional logic here where, even if putting this here triggers something, we need to find other objects in other containers, and we've got ourselves a game. For whatever reason, we can't pick up this chair, which drives me insane. Maybe the box collider is like hitting against something else. I don't know. But pending some troubleshooting, you should be able to pick up anything that script is attached to. So let's see if I can see what would be the problem. What a mystery. All right, well, it's tempting for me to try to figure out why I can't pick up that chair. However, I don't have a ton of time left, and I did want to show you guys one more little coding thing that I did prep. This is, of course, the difference between preparing to show people how to code something and what it's like in real life, which, as you know from programming with us at EdAlliance, it's a lot of trying and troubleshooting things that mysteriously don't work when we expect them to. So I'm actually going to show you a related line of code you could add in a third-person situation, which is, of course, related to my cat project. And I'm going to hop into that scene and show you some more uses of this Rigidbody.AddForce that I used to throw the cube across the room. So let's hop down here into my scenes folder. And here I have a cat scene for you. This has been updated a little bit, I think, since last time I casted with you guys. I've been making this avatar better and better because I personally love the idea of a mischievous cat that's ruining the inside of someone's apartment. And since we didn't have an avatar for this, I've just been enjoying the process of making one myself. So the cat works pretty well now. She jumps pretty nicely, and her physics are a bit better than they were the last time I talked to you guys. Her camera works pretty well. I do end up inside her stomach when I pass through a wall, but at least I don't end up on the other side of the wall and unable to see the cat. So there's that. But what I wanted to show you guys here was, essentially if in this scene you wanted to, if in this scene you wanted to actually create an effect for this kind of attack motion that I've got queued up in here, you could use a similar line of code to what I showed you for tossing the cube across the room. And I wanted to show you how I would implement that for this cat avatar, just to finish up the discussion of adding a rigid body force to things. So on this cat, there's something really just weird about the lighting in this that I need to fix. So apologies for a very shadowy animal there. I'm going to click on the cat and open her player controller script. We can just go edit script here on animal controller, which is this big long script that's controlling her movement and making her interact really nicely with the ground and with gravity and everything. It's overall it's pretty nice code for a third person player controller. But what you would want to do here is thinking about some behavior for this cat when she's entering a trigger volume for an object that she can move. So in the original game that was inspired by this, there are certain objects in the room, if you recall, that the cat can knock over. and other objects that she cannot knock over. And so, of course, what you're thinking is for those objects that she can knock over, when she enters their trigger and clicks on the mouse button, she's going to use that same rigid body add force to push them. And if you wanted to create code for that, I would start with on trigger stay. So if you, again, mouse over this in Visual Studio, you would see on trigger stay is called once per frame for every collider other that is touching the trigger. And so we can just, every single frame that I'm in the trigger volume for an object I can move, we can run this logic. And inside of my on trigger stay, I would want to check a couple things. First, I would want to check if the trigger that I'm inside of has a tag that lets me know the object is one I can knock over. So I'm going to do something like compare tag here, and I'm going to use a tag like, let's call this knockable. And then I also want to check if, I'm actually clicking on the mouse button to attack or push the object. So we can check to see if I'm clicking the mouse button by input.get mouse button down. And then the left mouse button, which is the normal one you click on to do everything, is just 0. So essentially what that says is if I'm in a trigger that's a knockable item and I click the mouse, I do this. And again, here is where I can use a Rigidbody.AddForce. So I'm actually going to get the rigid body of whatever the object is that I'm running into. Because again, this script is the cat script. So I have to get the component, the rigid body component of the other thing. So I type rigid body here, and then some of those, and then here's my add force. All right. So just like in the last one, I could do an add force of the camera, the direction the camera is looking. In fact, if we wanted to, we could even visit this pickup and just take this same line of code and toss it right in there. So, seems like a pretty good place to start. Let's make this a little higher. Let's make it be 200. I think we've got a camera in here, tagged main camera as well in this scene. So this is a great place to start for prototyping code like this, right? I want the cat to kind of make this like pecking motion, and then I want the object that she's attacking to go in the opposite direction. Let's do 250. So cool. So I'm going to hop back into my scene. Let's check let's check the directional light just a second here. I just want to make it be a little bit more like sane here. That's not too bad. All right. And then I've got a cube here. I believe I already set this up so I could show you guys. Yes. So I've got this cube set up to work with this code already. But what you would need to do if you wanted to make an object you could knock over using add force is, in this case, it comes with a box collider because it's a cube. I've added the trigger volume there, so this is where she needs to stand in order for that on trigger stay to go off. And then finally, of course, the cube has a rigid body on it, so I can use Rigidbody.AddForce. So I've got my on trigger stay, she attacks, and the cube flies out. So I'm a pretty big fan of this, right? Like immediately it's working the way I want it to. I could have the force be more so that she makes it fly more. It looks like she's still having a hard time pushing it. Yeah, boom. But one thing that might work out a little weirdly in the case of a third person situation is check this out. I'm going to start this over so we're in the original situation. Remember how I said, let's add force in the direction that the camera is looking? So that always makes sense in a first person context, because when I look, I'm always looking in the direction that the me who's standing in the game is also looking. But in the case of a third person controller, it's possible for me to be looking in a different direction than the avatar. So watch what happens when now I use her attack. Okay, now that's not the behavior we expect. And that's, of course, because we set this situation up where we said, I want every time the cat attacks for that thing to fly away from the camera in the direction that I'm looking. And as it turns out, in the case of a third person player, what I want to happen is for the cube to fly away, not in the direction I'm looking, but in the direction that the cat is looking. And what's so interesting about this is third person and first person don't seem that different mentally, especially when you're playing a game. In fact, we've all probably played video games where you can easily switch back and forth between a third person and a first person character representation of you in the game. However, when you're actually doing game development, a third person, especially in a 3D setting, versus a first person character is a totally different setup with your camera and the way that you code. So I'm going to hop back into the cat script now, and I'm going to change this not to reference the way the camera is looking, but to reference the way the cat is looking. And if I want to reference the way the cat is looking, I can actually talk about my own transform because, of course, this script is itself attached to the cat. So I'm going to keep transform.forward. I can delete all of the logic referring to the main camera, and instead I simply type game object, which, as we know, game object with a small g refers to the game object this script is attached to. If you use it with a capital G, you're referring to the general class of game object, which has all kinds of methods you can access to run certain types of logic. It's two different senses of that word, and that one I want to use here is the small g game object, which points to whichever object this script is attached to. All right, I want even more force here too, so I'm going to up this to 300. I'm going to hop back over here, and I'm going to see if pushing it from the side works the way I expected. So I'm going to run around here, leaving the camera facing, essentially perpendicular to the cat. And I'm going to click. Well, that didn't work at all. There we go. I was about to be like, why did I get another one of these inexplicable bugs? So we do have some bugginess with this, right? Like it's working intermittently, which is maybe due to the fact that my cursor is, I might have been clicking outside the screen actually. Nope, it is intermittent. Sometimes we can fix that with, oh, goodbye, hello. Oh my goodness. So sometimes that intermittent business can be fixed by switching the Rigidbody to continuous collision detection. I can give continuous collision detection to the cat too, and that might help that intermittent situation there. It's a little bit more sensitive. It's more processor power, but in a small game like this, it's immaterial. Oof. Ha! So I think this is pretty good behavior for a third person avatar. I like the effect I'm getting here. I like that it's kind of dramatic when she goes to nudge it and it kind of slides out of the way. So lots of other tweaking and honing and prototyping you could do to make that effect work the way you wanted. You could add a particle effect so that every time she goes like this, there's kind of a like a dust cloud or some kind of visual to indicate that like this attack is happening. And of course, any smart game dev would add some good sound to that as well, which we are all pretty familiar with at this point. But yeah, so the general focus of what I've been talking about today has, of course, been having a character in a scene um, interact with an item or an object in the scene by referencing that object or item's rigid body and adding a force to that rigid body to push it. In the case of the first person controller in the cabin, what we did was pushed a cube out so that we had a little bit more naturalistic behavior in dropping an object. And in the case of the cat, we had the intention to make the cat kind of aggressively push an item out of the way so it can start being a nuisance inside of someone's home. And in both of those cases, what you're doing is, of course, interacting with that object's rigid body. So lots of powerful stuff you can do once you understand how to work with rigid bodies in that way. I'm going to stop there, but let me know how you guys found this little chunk of coding practice that I took you through, and if you're using rigid bodies in your gameplay. Yes, I'm seeing in the chat, David is saying, I got the script working. That is absolutely excellent. In fact, let's wrap up this final session. I can do it super quickly unless I've got a big pull. I had David's game here, and David was one of the people that successfully was able to add me as a collaborator to his Unity project. And I had the immensely fun pleasure of, last time I casted, of course, I was showing you guys how to set up this cabin. And I'm like, oh, we have a first person controller in here. And I hop in the cabin. And then, of course, immediately inside the cabin, instead of the regular first person controller, I happen upon someone with a gun running around in this cabin, which is somewhat terrifying given the small size of the room that you're in. Of course, nothing's shootable yet, but perhaps I need to pull David's changes and see what else he's done. Incidentally, what was interesting to me about this in David's project is, let me actually run the game again to illustrate it. What happened here is David dropped in a different first-person shooter controller, not the one that comes with the standard assets, but the Easy FPS controller. And I noticed that this player controller has a wonky relationship with some of the objects in this scene. So for whatever reason, it's seeing these background ones here in front of some of these other ones, and I see the drawers through the wall as well. I don't know if this is true because I haven't worked with Easy FPS a lot, but I kind of suspect that there may be something intentional about that related to potentially being able to see through walls with like an infrared type of perception. Not totally sure, but I certainly found it interesting that I can suddenly, look through this wall and see a representation of that pantry on the other side. So just something to notice. It's a bit weird. Definitely think that if you wanted to add a gun into this scene, you might be well served by integrating some of the Easy FPS assets with the basic first person controller. And I'm going to go ahead and just publish this. A shout out to David that I did not change anything about your game, but I do want to be able to pull any changes you've made. Oh, looks green, so I'll just have to follow along and see what you're working on. I'm so glad to hear you got the script working, and in the next couple days, I'll continue to pull this project and see what happens in this house. I know you're going to make some exciting stuff in here. It looks like the first person point of view is the focus here, which makes sense because, of course, David's project is tentatively titled and this is prototyping, so that could change. But I love this 3 fortnights at home. Definitely in the spirit of the theme. Hope it doesn't get too bloody, but let's just see what happens as the development continues and we've got the ability to pick things up. So I've been having a lot of fun with this one. On the next cast, I'll keep working with this first person scene if this is the focus for you guys. I'm also going to do some fun experiments with setting up gameplay in the cat game, and maybe I'll touch on the delivery game as well, because I think a lot of what we're working on now in this prototype stage applies across all three types of games. So the nice thing is, one script can sometimes work in multiple games. You have to customize it and you have to change it. Like, as you saw, I'm like, oh, just drop this on the chair. And then, like, I can't pick up the chair. But, with some troubleshooting and iterating on your game, you can almost always transfer one thing into another, which is, of course, what we do all the time. Back at our studio at EdAlliance, we constantly reuse scripts and prefabs from one game project to the next. So again, be in touch with your questions if you guys have them. Just keep us updated what you're working on, and keep in mind that on Monday, I will send out a link to a private Google Hangouts team meeting that's only for folks who are past or current members of the EdAlliance studio. So on Monday, you'll have a chance to talk to me one-on-one or two-on-one or three-on-one, just depending on how many people join. Probably we'll get a group, but you'll have the opportunity to chat with me a bit about your game project. And I'll give you specific feedback and things to work on based on where you're at with your game starting next week. I see. I gotcha. I'm just reading here. David says, I only put easy FPS color because I didn't have the standard assets yet. Actually, on that topic, before I sign out here, I can fill you in really quick, David, and anyone else who's interested in finding an easy download of the standard assets. So I looked this up. And if you were watching last time, you know that I tried to find the standard assets on the Unity asset store, and they were not there, which literally they were removed last week, if that happened, because the week before I was prototyping these projects using the standard assets. And I found out that they're not in the asset store anymore, but you can actually download them from the Unity download archive. So let me show you guys that. If you go to the Unity download archive, this is how you get the standard assets. This is the most hidden thing I've ever seen. But you would scroll down here and you would actually click on Unity 2017. And then, doesn't matter which release here, but if you go to downloads and you scroll down, standard assets is actually an option in the downloads. And clicking on that, you'll automatically pop a window that lets you download the installer. Of course, on the right, there is a Mac option, but this one's for PC. If you save that, you'll get an executable, and that executable actually just unzips the package onto your hard drive. So I'll run that and show you guys what happens. You click yes. Should see that somewhere on here. There it is. Essentially, all this does is you select the standard assets and then you pick the folder where you want the package to go. So I could even just select desktop here. If I click install, it'll put its folder here, and the folder is called editor. So once I had done this, double clicking here, I have standard assets, and then I have a set of Unity packages containing all of the standard assets. So this is another way of getting them. You can also ask for the big package from me. It's a pretty hefty download, and getting the installer is a pretty nice way. But so, for example, if I was here, I could go assets, import package, custom package, And then standard assets here, I've got all of these options. And if I wanted the first person character controller, I would import characters. So that's what you need to do to get the standard assets. And that is going to definitely be key if you want to work with this cabin. And also, I really, again, advocate using standard assets for their very nice cameras. So I really like those cameras for prototyping because they're set up to work nicely. And it's just so much better than coding up all these little camera details from scratch, like making it so it doesn't clip through a wall and hide your avatar from you. Before I log off today, David, I know you're there in the chat. If you want me to just load the standard assets in here to your project before I leave today, just let me know and I'll do that and push that for you. Um, totally want to check out your pick up the cube thing before I log off Twitch because what's the point of collaborating on projects if we can't check them out together? Super fun. So I'm going to let this grind. And if you do want me to push the standard assets for you, just let me know. And I will be happy to do that right away so that you have access to every one of those folders. Anyway, as I'm wrapping up this last final thing, I just wanted to say thanks, as always, for listening in. This video will be available for you to review on the Make Room YouTube channel. And I will be casting every Monday and Wednesday, so you can always come on and check in with me on the chat. I think at this point, David's project is the one I have had no problems with accessing. I think everybody else made a heroic effort to add me to their projects, but I still haven't been able to pull those projects. So if you did add me when you were on the live cast on Monday, you'll definitely want to come next week on Monday and attend the private team meeting on Google Hangouts just to get any minor IT issues out of the way. So definitely show up for that so I can start pushing and pulling in your project and giving you assets, just working on your game with you, which is the thing I would most love to do. Looks like David did get the standard assets. Okay, so that answers that question. That's what's taking so long here. Happy to see it. Everything you need looks like it's going to be in your project. So let's reload the scene and try picking up a cube. Oh my goodness. It's so unsettling to have a gun in front of you when you're picking up a cube. But word, I'm so excited to see this working. I do believe that transform for that thing is in a weird location. Oof. What a strange thing. It's like I can kind of walk past it. Cube, where are you? Companion cube vibes. Okay, I'm like running underneath that thing. That's an interesting effect. I would definitely try it with the other character controller before doing anything else. Yeah. Looks like you've got it in the right location. So I'm thinking maybe some of those weird visual issues are definitely coming from the FPS, easy FPS player controller stuff, which that thing is a pretty complicated controller. So, I would say try the standard access controller with it if you want to, have the focus be picking up objects. So that would definitely be the next place to go with this. Unless you really do want to run around in the house and shoot the furniture, which, it's a little violent, but to each their own. Anyway, super excited to see that you followed along with me for this. David, props to you for being a totally freaking awesome game developer. Somebody who I could probably learn something from, including I did find this amazing thing in here that was like a flying third person scene. I was like, I've never seen this asset before, and it just looks so cool and fun. It's like just got some really nice, like sort of cell shaded looking stuff, and then like you can press F to fly, which is just so dope. Like, what a fun type of gameplay to design for. I would just love to see a game that is based on flying around. So, David, props to you for finding really cool assets. All right, guys, I'm past the hour and you've been on for an hour. So, if you made it this far, congratulations. We're at the end of our Wednesday live cast. Thanks again for tuning in. I always appreciate your time, and I'm glad we're making games together throughout this crazy time of social isolation. I will be checking your projects and watch me next week on Monday, 4 p.m. This is Natalie signing off for EdAlliance Media's video game design at EdAlliance. Bye, Dan. Bye, David. See you guys later.